Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Rockwood number 2842 in a 613 finish. Okay, this is a pair, it's a set of automatic flush bolts. Automatic flush bolts are really typical and common pieces of equipment that are usually, they're very common. And they're usually called into play when you need to have the ability to, you have a pair of doors, obviously. And the fact that they're automatic comes into play two ways that I see it. The first and foremost way is when you have a pair of doors and they're fire rated. So what that means is the cardinal rules of a fire-rated door, there are three of them. There are two that are really the ones that you learn first. Must be self-closing, must be self-latching, and must be free-swinging as well. Free-swinging is just that the door must be able to move, but self-closing and self-latching. Automatic flush bolts are compliant with the requirement of self-latching. Self-closing will be whatever vehicle or mechanisms are closing the door. However, that's automatically happening. The automatic flush bolt will give you the self-latching requirement as fulfilled, whereas a manual flush bolt cannot. Manual flush bolts are only currently permitted by code in pairs of door applications where there is no standard occupancy on the interior side of that opening. So an example of that would simply be a electrical closet on floors of a building. You've got a 4-foot deep closet that's 8 foot wide. You've got a pair of doors because you need to get to the fuse panels. That application will permit a pair of manual flush bolts when both doors are fire rated, because those doors, the logic as it's been explained to me is those doors are only open and accessed when they are actively being worked on, meaning there's someone actively at the opening. Those doors are not left open. They're not left open, without, they're simply standard, usage of such a door would be that it would never be actually left open or left unlatched. However, when you have human occupancy on the other side, like you would in all other applications of pairs of fire-rated doors, like offices, cross-corridor, you're going to have human occupancy. Both of those leaves need to be self-closing. They both need to be self-latching. And we'll talk about, in a moment, the other hardware necessary to really make this happen. The other application where I see these is I will see a condo building that has, let's say it's 20 stories tall. Well, let's say 8. A pair of doors that will have, depending on the occupancy and the quantity of people that it has been formulated that will pass through there, one door will have an exit device. Given the width and given the occupancy number, the quantity of people, based on the formula that's used and defined in NFPA, you can have, in certain instances, one of those leaves without an exit device, or a fire device, in this case, a fire device, a fire exit device, not a panic exit device. Fire exit is for fire doors. Panic exit are for non-rated doors. They are different devices. So you could have a fire exit on one door, automatic flush bolts on the other. Okay, that's permissible in certain instances. You'll hit that first door. As soon as you hit the door with the exit device, the other door is now unlatched. It will move. If you push the door with the active door open, it will just move open. And that's permissible. That's the other area where I see these. So if you're detailing a job, and you know that you have a pair of fire-rated doors, and it is that sort of application where you have a condo building and an exit device is only scheduled on the active door, for sure be thinking automatic flush bolts on the other door, not manual, if they're fire-rated doors. Now, the other hardware that goes along with automatic flush bolts is, well, back to the cardinal rule. Self-closing, self-latching. So, just for sake of simplicity, let's say that you've got 2 door closers on the opening, one on each door. You've got, let's just say that you have a mortise lock on the active door because you don't actually have to have exit device compliance. But they are fire-rated doors, so now we're back to must be self-closing and must be self-latching. You could literally have just a mortise lock only. So you've got a closer on the active, you've got a mortise lock. You've got a closer on the inactive, and you've got automatic flush bolts. The way automatic flush bolts work are simply this. When the inactive door closes, the active door then comes and closes, and as the active door closes, it will push in the spring-loaded trigger that is in the edge of the inactive door, forcing the bolts to lock up and down into the header and into the sill or threshold. That's how that works. The other piece of equipment that you need is a coordinator. Simply stated, a coordinator says, okay, I need to tell which door to close first. If I have the active door closed first, the inactive door is not going to close and latch properly, because in order for automatic flush bolts to work, the inactive door needs to be in the 0-degree position. It needs to be in the closed position. A coordinator will say, you hold on, active door, let the inactive door close first, now then you can come along and close. And it literally will prevent the active door from closing until the inactive door is in the closed position. Coordinators are a different video, a different subject, and you can research those. There are other pieces of hardware that you might need to consider when you're throwing coordinators, depending on what style. A bar coordinator is probably going to require some additional hardware so that you can fit closers onto the opening, but not necessarily. You might need mounting brackets, which are basically a contraption that is installed underneath, on top of the coordinator to the header. You then take your parallel arm brackets and screw those to the mounting brackets so that you're not screwing your parallel arm brackets through your coordinator. You can also use a coordinator in automatic flush bolts. Think of it this way. If you have a 2-piece steel astragal, you could have a left-hand reverse active where you've got an offset bar on the pull side of the active door, but then you have on the inactive door a U-shaped astragal. So you literally cannot have the active door closed because the offset bar will be hanging into the opening, and ding, ding, it's not going to close. So a coordinator can be used in that application when fire rating's not an issue, but you need to time the doors because you've got a 2-piece astragal, or just a flat bar astragal, or a Z astragal, or an H astragal, whatever your manufacturer is calling it. Doesn't matter. If you have something overlapping, you're going to need a coordinator, is the bottom line. There are different types of coordinators, but a bar style might complicate the rest of the installation. Okay, now, let's move forward on what a 2842 is. I'm going to pull all the pieces out of the box here. You're going to have your finished plates. And remember earlier I said 613. That's really going to, 613 is the BHMA number for oil rubbed bronze over solid bronze. That will only apply to the finished plate of the hardware. The rest of all of it is going to be steel-based components. These are your flush bolts. They are identical. This is a set top and bottom. Okay, I'm going to put one away because we don't need to look at both of them. The bolts are identical top and bottom. They are not self-latching. They are typical bolts, not latches. I will put one of the guides away because we don't need the guide. And I will put one of the trim plates away. Okay, so now Rockwood has some nice features that are happening here. Top of the door, trigger down. Bottom of the door. Okay, same application. The trigger will be up. Okay, so just for sake of demonstration, I'm going to thread my rod into the holder. When that active door closes, it's going to hit the trigger. It's going to push the trigger and watch the rod. That's simple. That's how we're engaging. Okay. this device has a safety feature where if this cannot enter the header, I'm going to restrict this from moving. Okay, it's got an override feature. In addition to that, this piece of equipment has another piece of really cool technology happening. Okay. And I'm just going to get right to it, then we'll go back and overview. Thermal lock automatically locks the inactive door under high heat conditions due to fire. This is automatically going to be held captive in the extended position in a fire event. Okay. The thermal lock that you see is nothing other than this little plastic doodad that's here. This little piece of plastic. If I were to pull that out, that piece of wire that looks like a paper clip back here is basically going to go ting. It's going to come out. It's going to catch this little roll pin that's there. So doors closed and locked, my bolts are extended. In the event of a fire, the plastic piece is going to melt. The spring that looks like a paper clip is going to shoot out, and it's going to catch underneath the roll pin, keeping this in the locked position. Okay, so you've got safety where you're not going to damage the equipment, if, especially in a sill condition where dirt, debris, things get stuffed down in there, or if there's misalignment, you won't damage the door at all. Okay, because of how that's going to operate. Okay. And in the event of a fire, it'll lock closed. That's super awesome. I have to admit, I don't know if that is a requirement by code to have an automatic flush bolt with a thermal lock. That's a good question. I will investigate that at some point. I don't know if a thermal lock is mandatory. I'm tempted to say no, and that this is just a feature of Rockwood. Now, extended description information. This is a set of automatic top and bottom flush bolts. The size is 6 3/4 by 1. We're going to go over that when we look at the faceplate. You're going to get a whole bunch of fasteners. This will work with metal doors up to 3 hours for a pair of 4080s. So an 8080 opening, up to 3 hours, this is completely compliant. Non-handed, low closing force, fully automatic, opening active door retracts, both top and bottom automatic flush bolts. Override feature prevents damage to door. I demonstrated that. When I restrict this, it's still going to move and not damage the unit. Bolt head rod is adjustable up to 1.5 inches. So depending on what your condition is, especially at the floor, you can kind of squeeze some more length out of all of this because you can tailor that. You know, if you've got a 1/4 inch undercut down to your threshold most likely, or if you've got a 3/4 inch undercut from the bottom of your door to your sill, you're going to be able to tailor so that you project properly into that cavity. And I believe that projection is mandatory at 1/2 inch. Don't quote me on that. It's called out in NFPA 80. I have simply forgotten the exact amount. But if you're a fire door inspector, testing to make sure that there is proper bolt engagement in the strike is mandatory. I believe it's 1/2 inch. Thermal lock we talked about. A 570 dust-proof strike. You're going to want a dust-proof strike in any of these instances. A 570 by Rockwood is a literal strike that gets mounted into the floor that has a spring-loaded lid on it so that every time the bolt goes in, it will push the spring-loaded lid in, and every time it retracts, that spring-loaded lid will come up and flush to the top of the dust-proof strike, helping prevent the accumulation of dirt, debris, things of that nature down into the cavity, preventing, helping to prevent a potential future failure of operation as a result of dirt and debris in the hole. Now, there is a product brochure below this. Let's tackle that next. You'll see the 2842, the set. You can buy a 2840 alone if you want. A 2840 could very simply be used when you have a fire pin installed in the bottom application. There are certain applications where you can have a top flush bolt only, automatic, and then a fire pin at the bottom, just one bolt rather than two. Applications for that would be a hospital. Hospitals do not like drilling anything into their floors. They like to be able to mop that stuff super clean. Nothing into the floor is the rule of thumb, and so a fire pin can be mounted in the edge of the door and will secure the bottom area of the two doors in the event of a fire. Also, the combination, the 28-45 set are there. The only difference between the 28-42 and the 28-45 is the top is a self-latching at the top only, which means every time the door is closed, the inactive door is closed, it's going to be latched. It's going to stay latched in all instances. So if the inactive door is closed with a 28-45 set, it's latched. The way to unlatch it is to take your finger and stick it into the quarter-sized hole to retract the latch bolt. Then you can open up both doors. It's very practical that people will use 28-42s because they really just have an application where that door needs to stay latched in basically all instances, is the bottom line. Not that it's going to permit you to get away from a coordinator. You know, you still need to coordinate the doors properly. You don't want the active door to close first if that would cause a failure of operation. So if your application calls for a self-latching, look at the 28-45. Now, to the machining part, let's look at the template. A technical drawing is included with the hardware, and it's there as well. Okay, that'll be included. Now, I've mortised. I should say I've machined. I have prepped for flush bolts and steel doors and wood doors more times than I can count or remember. They're always super easy. The bottom line is you have wood doors and you have steel doors. This is for a metal door. That's the bottom line. If you have a wood door, a 28-42 is the wrong set to use because it is listed for metal door applications. Now, it doesn't say it on there. It does say UL listed. The reason that this is for a pair of metal doors is that the design of the bolt itself is not conducive to installation into a wood door. What I mean by that is this. If we take the body only, top body only, you can look at this. I look at this and say, okay, well, that's an easy preparation to do. I know that I've got to have a chase, basically this dimension, all the way up to the top of the door to permit that rod to come down and in. I know that I've got to provide that. Okay. I know that I also have to provide a prep in the body, basically this deep, this wide, this tall. Okay. So I can fit the body, and then I know in the edge of the door I've got to provide a 6 3/4 by 1 prep that's just the thickness of this, so I can slide that gizmo in there. Then from the top or the bottom of the door, I can run my bolt down, and generally, actually what you would do is you would thread that on first, the way I would do it. Then I would bring it into the door and bring that out to the top or bottom of the door. I would engage my bolt guide, and they are both square shaped, and that's for a reason. That is by design. Depending on it needs to look like this or this, depending on the construction of your door. That square profile is going to keep the bolt from turning and unthreading over time. So I would get this installed first on my door. I would bring this through the cavity in the door, shoot that out the end of the door. I would then test to make sure that I've got proper engagement, proper throw, and then I would screw it down. Okay. The bottom line is a wood door is not conducive to having a big channel in the edge of the door to permit all this. You can prep all of this into your door, into a wood door. It's not a problem. But drilling a hole from the end of the door to run this bolt down through is where the problem comes in. That's why you use a wood door style, which are basically a corner-shaped flush bolt where you can just route the top or the bottom of the door and then route the side of the door. put this corner-shaped gizmo onto the door and screw it down, and it's in good shape. The problem with that application is if it's a manual flush bolt for a wood door and it's 8 foot, you've got to think about a specialty flush bolt. But when it's automatic, it really doesn't matter, okay? Because you're not ever reaching up unless it's self-latching at the top. So you need to be mindful of that. You can sure extend this. This is just 1/4 threaded rod. So if you had a 9-foot door and you did not want this up at 12 inch from the top of the door to the center of the prep, you could just insert a longer threaded rod, a 1/4 rod, which Rockwood can supply, and bring that down to whatever height you want. It does need to be determined, and I know that it is permissible to do so with a longer rod. So making the preparation in the edge of the door, as shown in the template, is just literally simple and straightforward. They're kind of showing you a 5 and 5. They're directly showing you a 5 5/8 mortise height. You can see how that would kind of make sense. 5 5/8 overall height. Yeah, I mean it's more than you need. Well, is it actually? Yeah, it's certainly. Well, no, maybe not. Yeah, it's certainly more than you need, but where that 5 5/8 is coming into, if I stay shy of the screws, you can see that I'll be shy of the screws completely. I'll be short of them, I mean to say. A 2-inch overall depth from the faceplate to the prep, yeah, 2-inch would be really good. And then the width, they're not giving you a width of the body itself, they're just saying 1 inch wide. And that's where the finished plate comes in. That's nothing other than a scalp plate, just a thin piece of bronze that's been finished. You can have any flavor that you want, your brasses, your bronze, your chromes, stainless. It's going to be 1 inch wide. It's going to be 6 3/4 tall. This is a 12-inch style bolt, and what that means is nowhere on there is really called out 12-inch, but what would happen is, and you're going to prep this based on the template, not on what I'm saying, but the top or the bottom of the door to the center of the faceplate, that's going to be 12-inch. That's kind of how they're known. I wouldn't call this a 14-inch. Top of the door to the center of my trigger, I would still call it a 12-inch bolt. So then you've got to prep the top or bottom of the bolt. Depending on your door construction, if you have inverted top and bottom channels or a bottom channel, you'll install it this way. If you've got a flush channel, you're going to prep it this way. It's very likely this will be the top prep, but then will also look like this at the bottom because you have an inverted bottom channel at the bottom, but at the top it'll be flush. You get that bolt to stick right in there. The only other dimension that you really need is indeed called out. It's the back set. 3/4 inch from the edge of the door to the vertical center line of the rod. So now you know where to place this center line. Okay, you've got all the other details that you need. Suffice it to say, you do get screws for everything. The only other thing in here that we've not gone over, and the strike for the bolt is back here. I'll take it out. Sorry for being stingy on showing you the parts. Didn't intend that. There's your strike. That'll go into the header or into the sill or threshold. This little gizmo here, that's called a strike, or maybe a scar plate. I would call it a strike. This mounts to the edge of the active door, and the role that it plays is simply this: when the active door is closing, the trigger will hit the strike plate and not the edge of the door. That's what this is for. These are surface mounted. This is very thin material. It's probably 35 thousandths thick. Oh, 60 thousandths. 60 thousandths thick. So it's a 1/16 of an inch. So be mindful of that you're going to have some requirement there. Screws for the bolt head guide. And that's it. That's literally everything that's in the package. Again, if you're doing wood doors, stay away from these. Obviously, if it's fire rated, don't prep anything in the field because you would not be permitted to do that in the field. This material would all need to be ordered and manufactured by the factory who is supplying the doors and frames, or a licensed machiner is what we used to call it, a shop who holds a license approval for prepping doors and frames for hardware outside of the manufacturer. Now, we've gone over the template. We've gone over where and when you're going to use this material. The final thing to discuss would be the, let's see here now. The link below this video to the manufacturer's page, where you can pull up not only all of the Rockwood products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. I'm quite partial to Rockwood, and it's because of a number of reasons. The first thing that comes to mind at this moment is that they make complex things very simple and straightforward. A lot of trim and auxiliary is not complex. Flush bolts aren't complex, although they're more complex, I suppose, in a kick plate. But they get up into a lot of custom door pulls, even locking door handles as well, and they really make it easy on you as a distributor, as an installer, as a specifier, as a detailer, to be able to get their material understood and conveyed through the manufacturing through the construction ecosystem. Excellent customer service, technical support, prompt, reliable, predictable shipping lead times, phenomenally dependable. And it is a rare instance where I would have a cause to think that I'm going to throw someone else onto the job than Rockwood. You're only as good as the way you treated me on the last job, right? Isn't that the saying in construction? Rockwood just keeps getting business and over again. And that's because they earn it, and they deserve it, in my opinion. Any questions on the Rockwood 2842 and a 613 finish, or any other Rockwood product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you very much.